Hi, I'm Chris Martin. I'm here out in the plant. Behind me is our new tour board that shows you what we've been doing in Mexico. And I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the history of our Mexican operation. 23 years ago, we were solicited to consider opening an operation in Mexico. The maquiladora system was relatively new. It was a Clinton administration initiative. And what it would allow American businesses to do would be to bring parts into Mexico, have them assembled, and bring them back out for distribution either in the US or globally without any duty or taxes. And what we were seeing, now if you remember back then, inflation was pretty high, and we recognized that some of the products we made could be made to offer you more value in Mexico than here in Nazareth. And so we took a chance and through our shelter operator hired 14 people to supplement the string manufacturing that we were doing here in Nazareth. And it worked. And it worked. And it worked. And we eventually moved into a bigger facility. And over time, and it took several years, we transitioned the string operation from Nazareth to Mexico. The challenge for me was, how do I not lay anybody off? Because I had no interest in doing that. And I have to tell you selfishly, I don't want to lay anybody off because my fear is if I lay them off, they're not going to come back when business picks up. So I talked to my coworkers here in Nazareth and I said, we really have to consider making these strings where the labor is less expensive. And they said, okay, Chris, what's going to happen to those of us that make strings? And I said, if you're willing to learn how to make guitars, I'll find a job for you. And that's what happened. And over time, the string makers transitioned from making Martin guitar strings to Martin guitars here in Nazareth, and we eventually moved the entire string operation to Navajoa, where it's today, and it's really flourishing. So I was at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, and I was walking around. There's a little craft area, and we had a display there. I was working in our display, and I'm walking around to see what other crafts are there. And I walked into a booth, and they had these little, kind of triangular shaped fretted instruments. And I was talking to the fellow that was running the booth. His name was Bob McNally. I said, Bob, what are these? He said, oh, there's called a strum stick. And I make them and I sell them at craft fairs and little gift shops. I said, that's pretty cool. How does it work? He said, oh, it's got a dulcimer keyboard and you just kind of bar fret and they're pretty cool, a little teeny thing. In the back of the booth, he had a 6-string version of a strum stick. And I said, Bob, what's that? He said, well, I have some friends who play the guitar. And they asked me if I could make them a guitar-like version of the strum stick, primarily because it was portable and durable. And I said, well, how many do you make? He said, I make one once in a while. They're a little harder to make. He said, do you want me to tell you how I make them? I said, yeah, I'm curious. He said, well, I go up to your factory. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, I go up to your factory and I buy a reject mahogany blank. Okay. And then I bring it back. And I also buy a reject guitar back and a reject guitar top and a reject guitar fingerboard. But okay, what do you do with them? I bring them back to my shop and I take the bottom of that blank, that rectangular blank, and I cut a center piece out. And then I take what's remaining and I splay it out and I take that center piece and put it on the bottom. And then I take that reject guitar back that you sold me, and that becomes the back of my backpacker. And I take the reject guitar top that you sold me, and that becomes the top of my backpacker. Really? And then I take the reject guitar fingerboard that you sold me, and I cut the bottom of it off, and I make the bridge out of that, and the rest of it I use as the fingerboard. And I'm thinking to myself, we could do that. Well, now that we're making strings successfully in Mexico, we're thinking about what else can we do in Mexico? And I said to Bob, can you come up, bring a backpacker up, come up to the plant next week. I want to introduce you to some of my colleagues. So I get all the powers to be in a room, and Bob comes in and he's got a little nylon gig bag, and he pulls his handmade, 6-string backpacker. Didn't even have the name backpacker at that point. He had another name for it. And everybody in the room started laughing. And I thought, oh, this isn't going to go well. And he strummed it a little, kind of, banjo sounding, but he talked about how durable it was and how portable it was. And I said, Bob, tell my colleagues how you make it. And he told the story about coming up here to buy reject Martin guitar parts to make the backpacker. And that's when people began to go, And I said, and Bob has a patent on this, and Bob is willing to license the technology to us to make them in Mexico. So Bob left, and we sat down. We said, maybe. Maybe it will work. Who knows? Maybe in our wildest dreams, maybe we'll sell 5,000 before the fad goes away. And let's give it a shot. So we worked out an arrangement with Bob, and we put some very rudimentary fixturing together. Chipboard, really. We got it down to Mexico. Bob went down with us, showed us how to make them, got it up and running, took it to a trade show. Bill, how many backpackers have we made?
We're closing in on 250,000.
5,000 came and went, and we are getting very close to building our 250,000th backpacker guitar. The backpacker was the beginning of the process that we have used to teach our Mexican coworkers to ultimately make the guitar that you see behind me. A couple years later, and again, this is a fairly long discussion. I was at I did a clinic in Albuquerque. And after the clinic, a gentleman comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Chris, can I show you this guitar I invented?" I'm like, I'm always game. Let's see what's in that case. So he opens it up, and the first thing I thought to myself is, that's pretty well made. And the gentleman says, I didn't make it. I commissioned a luthier here in Albuquerque to make this for me, but I'd like you to make them for me. And I took a look at it, and I realized what it was, because I had seen something like it at a luthier's convention. And I said, that's pretty clever. He said, yeah, I know it's clever. I have a patent on it. Aha, okay. And I want you to make them. And I said, oh, Mr. Witchell, this guitar really deserves to be made somewhere where it can be made very affordably. And at this point in time, here in Nazareth, we were basically making D28s, D35s, D45s, D18s, triple O's. We didn't have medium price guitars. I said, Jim, I have some friends who import guitars from Asia. Why don't I hook you up with them and you're off to the races? Yeah, I don't really want to do that. I'd like to see it be made by a company whose brand I respect. I said, well, I don't know. He said, I'll keep in touch. Okay. So every couple of years he'd call, Chris, what's up? Hey, Jim, how are you? I said, did you? He said, no, I had some conversation with folks, but nothing came of it. Are you interested? I said, I can't wrap my head around it, Jim. Well, in the meantime, Tim Teal comes into my office on a Monday. Chris, what, Tim? Look at this guitar I invented over the weekend. And I'm looking at it. I go, Tim, you didn't invent this. A guy named Jim Witchell did, and he has a patent on it. Give him a call. We made an arrangement with Jim to build the X series under license. We started out with the LXM, right? Started out with the little guitar because the stresses are less. It was a bit of a challenge. Got that up and running, and then we went into the full-size X Series guitar, and now we're making the ukuleles down there, finally making a solid wood guitar in Mexico. It's been very exciting. Our Mexican colleagues come up all the time. My colleagues from here are down there all the time. In fact, Jen Weiss is down there right now. Jim Willis is going down. We're expanding. The business is growing. I will tell you that the feeling amongst my Mexican coworkers is that they are making Martin guitar products, and they want to satisfy your demand for the highest quality, just like we do here in Nazareth. Juan is the plant manager. Juan started with us 23 years ago. He was one of the first 14 employees, 3 of whom remain, including Juan, who's the plant manager. I get down once a year, taking my board of directors down next year to see the operation. They haven't been down in quite a few years. It's very exciting. It's helped to round out our product line. So now we're not only in the high end, but we're in the medium price guitar business. It's pretty cool. I'm really proud of it, and lots of opportunity to come. I've asked Bill Hall, who is our liaison here in Nazareth with our Mexican facility, to spend a couple minutes and talk to you about his experience in Mexico. Thanks.
Hi there, I'm Bill Hall. I'm lucky enough to have the job of directing our manufacturing operations in our facility in Mexico. Chris was just speaking about our operations. I first worked in connection with our facility 20 years ago when we started making the backpacker for the first time. And At that time, the operation was very small, and we concentrated specifically on string manufacturing, no real awareness of any woodworking technology. I've had the good fortune over 20 years of traveling back and forth to Navajoa, which is in the southern part of Sonora State, as we moved through an ever progressing product line, increasing our skill level. We've moved from the backpacker, which was more a woodworking experience, into building ukuleles, the LX guitars, full-size X series guitars, and currently we're working with solid wood spray finished instruments. Our workforce has grown. We're closing in on 400 people at this time. A wonderful workforce. We have a number of new people because of our growth, and a good group of people that have been with us 10, 15, 20 years. And we travel back and forth. The folks from Navajoa come up to Nazareth for specific training on new model introductions. And we bring our management staff here to just understand the way we go about doing our business. Our goal is to have manufacturing facilities that are very similar in the way we go about doing our business. The products are built in the same manner. We use much of the same tooling and fixturing, keeping things similar. Very important that our processes are the same so that our product quality is consistent, and if we have issues, we can troubleshoot those much easier when we're familiar with how things are being handled. The workforce is really a dependable, excellent, well-trained workforce. The advantage we have is we're not a border town. Navajoa is about 400 miles south of the Arizona border and is a family-centered town. We have, as we do in Nazareth, parents and children who work in the plant. We have husbands and wives, sisters and brothers. It's a family organization. We have parents who work first shift and then exchange children and come in on the second shift. They stay in the area. Border towns, the factories in the border towns have a tendency to be a more transient community, and it's very hard to find dedicated workers who will stay with you for a long time and are capable of absorbing the level of training that's required for our more complex instruments. The community itself is something we have worked to be involved in. Chris has a real penchant for community involvement to support the community that supports us. And as such, we've had the wonderful opportunity to work with 2 organizations in the Navajoa area that work with not necessarily homeless children, but children who are not in a family situation. They may be orphans or abandoned children or children that have been removed from the home because of abusive situations. We've hooked up with 2 organizations, one that deals with boys between the ages of about 4 and 18 years old, and another for girls that's been established in Navajoa as well. We've been able to work in conjunction with our partner Provinza in Navajoa to provide support in the way of just ongoing assistance for some of the things they need to add to their facilities, as well as a rather large project we did at one time to provide a dormitory where the boys' home was able to keep the children past the age of 12, so they didn't have to return to the streets or go to another home. And what I've found to be most gratifying through this experience, and anyone who travels to any extent would know that there is no difference between people in a community in Mexico or in the United States, or for that matter anywhere else in the world. These are families, children, parents. They have the same needs, the same expectations of life, the same desires. The common thread in the community, in the people that we work with, and in the way our manufacturing processes work is it's just a wonderful thing to be a part of. Anyone who could come to visit our facility would be absolutely impressed, and other than the people staffing the facility, it's hard to tell whether you're in Mexico or in the United States. I've been with the company 37 years. This is my current job, and I feel lucky to have it.